There's another trend on YouTube that I come across recently, which is the Jukebox Musician. They know every fucking song. You know, there isn't a song you can tell them that's been in the charts anyway, or that's been popular. There isn't a song they don't know. You know, people will come up to them, they're playing in the park or somewhere, and they come up, do you know this song? Oh, you know that song, they play it. And there's even guys that use drum machines and loops and things and will program the whole song in front of you and then play it. You know, and I know that these are specially edited videos that make them look good, but those kind of guys, those guys that are doing that, it's fantastic. But they can't do what you do. They can't come up with something that's new and original and speaks. Well, I don't know. Maybe they can. It's just they choose not to. I don't know. But that's the way I think. I've come across a few of these people in real life, you know, where they can play anything that they've heard. But they're a bit like the AI in that respect. The AI can give you anything it's heard before. It's brilliant at giving you that. Anything it's seen before, it can give you that. It can combine any one thing with any other thing. But ask the AI to come up with something original that's never been heard before, and it's not there. It's not able to do it. Which is one of the jukebox guys, the human jukebox guys. Their days are numbered because they're not needed anymore. Because the AI is going to do that. You talk about Spotify playlists. Eventually, within the next few years, if the record companies don't create a huge fuss about it, Spotify is going to be delivering AI-generated music to people who want to hear very specific kinds of tracks. And they won't have to pay an artist or a record company at all. It will just be generated on the fly for you. You'll be the only person who ever heard that track. But you know, everybody else will be hearing the same sort of original thing. But you and me, we're safe because nobody does what we do. And the only time the AI will be able to emulate us is if it's heard everything we've done. And by that, if that ever happens, then we'll be ahead of the game anyway. You know, so
yeah, because our next album will be new anyway, right? Because it's always I'm always pushing myself. I think, you know.
Yeah. I felt really good when I saw. I don't know if I shared it with you. But there was a couple of these guys, these human jukeboxes, who were aghast, you know, at what the AI could do in just like a 30-second clip. You know, it was producing exactly what they asked, and the lyrics were intelligent and seemingly insightful, and the music was just the way it should be. And they were kind of looking at one another and going, "It's over for us." And I was laughing because I was like, ain't over for me."
Yeah. And I hope it stays that way. I got a friend, a good friend. Actually, he just came up twice in my mind with the last thing you're talking about there, because I'll bring up both of those points. The AI thing, because I've been showing that AI site you sent me the other day, that where you type in a description, it writes you a 30-second song or a minute-long song,
yeah,
and puts lyrics and music to it. I sent him the song I made. I said, "What the fuck?" Because I typed in the concept of like the song I was working on at that time, and it spit out lyrics that were almost the same as the lyrics I just written, you know. And I was like, but they're better than my lyrics, right? And I was like, shit. And so I was like, well, clearly it gets what I'm trying to put out there. And I sent it to my friend Jay, and he's like, dude, why do you care? Like, AI is not as smart as you think it is. And I said, well, I think the problem is, Jay, is I think you think humans are smarter than they are. I said, because
yeah,
you know, like AI is still struggling with originality, but so do 99% of people, right? Like most people I know are not capable of any original thoughts, original ideas, or original anything. Like they just let other people's thoughts reverberate around their head. Their own perspective of their own life experience will have an impart effect on their thoughts, right? And the reason I know this is because I'm the same person, right? Like I know that 99% of my thoughts are unoriginal, and most of my music is unoriginal. Like I do write original music, and I know that you've told me and other people have told me that I write music unlike you've ever heard before, which that makes me feel an immense amount of pride. But I also know where the seeds of those things come from. Even the things that sound like things that you've never heard, I could probably grab 10 albums off my shelf and say, well, that came from here, this came from that came from this came from this. And you might say, well, the originality is the fact that you thought of all those things to bring them together in one spot, because no one else would have thought those would sound good together. You know, like the first time Elvis put peanut butter and bananas and bacon together. Like, who thought that would have tasted good? That's fucking delicious. You know?
Was that Elvis? Was he responsible for that one?
What? Well, that sandwich is called the Elvis. He asked for the Elvis sandwich.
We don't have the Elvis here. We've never heard of that before.
And well, apparently his mom used to make them for him, deep fried too. She would deep fry the sandwich.
Oh right,
like deep fried sandwich.
Oh, that does sound good. That does sound good.
Yeah,
we have
that's why we killed Elvis.
Deep fried pizza here. Do you have that there?
No, we don't. Thank God. Or we have deep fried cheese curds, for Christ's sake. So.
Oh
like,
wow!
There's a pub down the road, a Scottish pub that sells Scottish fish and chips and deep fried cheese curds.
Wow! Oh wow!
Yeah, but so we know how to do it pretty bad sometimes. And then so my buddy Jay, who I had the AI discussion with, I used to jam with him. Like we used to be in a band together called Twilight Rain back in college, and he's one of these musicians that is sort of like a fair weather musician. He never practices. He'll jam. He'll show up to the jam session, but he hadn't played since the last jam session. And he can play, and he keeps a good time on the drums, and he plays violin, but he's not a very good violin player, and he has a hard time playing compositions or staying in tune, like most amateur violinists do. But I remember he took lessons when we were in college. He went and took classical lessons with a classically trained violin instructor, and they sat down, and she was giving him charts and trying to get him to play like classical pieces, and he couldn't keep up. Like he was just like, this hurts my hand, this hurts my head, and she'd be like, okay, well, like how do you play violin then? And he just started like jamming, started making up a song on the spot. And she's like, what's this? He's like, oh, I'm making it up. And she's like, you can't play a song that I put in front of you, but you just make one up. And he was like, yeah, what's the deal there? She's like, I can't do that. She's like, I can play any song under the sun, but the right one, like that, on the spot? No, I could never do that.
Yeah.
And it was like eye-opening to him and me hearing his story about how like I realized that there is a big spectrum difference between, like we talked about, classically trained musicians, jukebox musicians that can play anything, but to write something original is so beyond their scope of like they don't have the confidence to sound bad.
It's
not
that. Yeah, I'm going to jump in because I've worked with people who've been classically trained, and it's apparent that the kind of people who take to classical training are the kind of people who thrive on the sheet music in front of them and interpreting that, and that's their thing, and they get very confused and very nervous when they're in the presence of somebody who can create stuff very easily. They don't understand it. They just don't. It's not that they have the ability and are afraid to use it, or that they're afraid of looking silly or anything like that. It just doesn't compute to them, because to those kind of people who are not the same as the jukebox musicians, but they need the instructions. But once they get the instructions, they're great. But to them, they can't understand spontaneous creation. It's something that's alien to them. And I've worked with a couple of people who struggled to improvise, and I literally had to instruct them, just pick. We're in the key of D, so just pick random notes from the key of D and just stick there, and it'll be fine. And but which mode are we in? And I have no idea. I don't know what modes are. We're in the key of D. Just when you get stuck, just play D. It'll fit. It doesn't matter. And there was one girl in particular. I've lost touch with her now, but she's actually on our first album, Yona Aitken. She's an artist from Edinburgh, and bless her, she was very much like that. We flung a keyboard in front of her. Right? You're playing that. What will I play? Well, you're classically trained, aren't you? Yeah, but what are we doing? We're in the key of D. Just play those notes. It'll be fine. And it is. And she's on this beautiful track called "In a Garden" on her first album, and it's a beautiful little piece, and her part's perfect. She picked all the right notes, it couldn't have been anything but perfect, but she was completely convinced it would sound awful. And it was only when we played it back to her and she heard it, and she was quite surprised at how it came out. So there are those people who don't get it because they're used to the idea of the genius of the author, the genius of the writer, like Beethoven, Mozart, all these people that they were brought up learning, that the act of creation was somehow because it's all hidden in the past and you don't know what Beethoven or Mozart were really like. They are mythical creatures who had this mythical ability, and they find it very difficult to recognise that that ability exists today. There are people round about you right now who are doing what those guys did, and you don't recognise them because they don't have, or you don't recognise them because they're too real. You can't see it, you know, so...